Hello everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are talking about something that is becoming impossible to ignore. Something that is affecting people all around the world. And something we are seeing more often in our daily lives. We are talking about climate change. And more specifically, extreme weather events that are happening right now. In recent years, we have seen stronger heat waves, heavier storms, bigger floods, and longer droughts. These are not just random events anymore. They are becoming more frequent. And in many places, they are becoming more dangerous as well. You might have noticed it yourself. Very hot summers that feel hotter than before. Sudden storms that cause damage in just a few hours. Or unusual weather patterns that do not feel normal anymore. Scientists around the world are studying these changes very carefully. And many of them agree on one important point. The climate of our planet is changing faster than before. But what does this actually mean for us in real life? Why is extreme weather becoming more common today? And how does it affect our cities, our homes, and our future? In this episode, we will explore all of these questions step by step. First, we will understand what climate change really is in simple words. Then, we will look at what extreme weather means and why it is increasing. After that, we will talk about real events happening around the world today. And we will also discuss how humans are connected to these changes. Finally, we will explore what we can do, both as individuals and as a global society. So, by the end of this episode, you will have a clear understanding of what is happening to our planet right now. And you will see how this topic is not just science, but something that affects all of us. So let's begin. Let's start with the basics. Before we talk about extreme weather, we first need to understand what climate change actually means. Climate change is the long-term change in Earth's average temperature and weather patterns. It means that the planet is slowly getting warmer over many years. And this change affects how weather behaves in different parts of the world. In simple words, climate change is when Earth's normal climate system is shifting. It is not just about one hot day or one strong storm. It is about a long-term change that continues for decades. Now, many people confuse weather and climate. But they are not the same thing. Weather is what we experience in a short time. For example, today it might be sunny. Tomorrow it might rain. Next week it could be cold or windy. Weather can change very quickly, even within hours. Climate, on the other hand, is the average weather of a place over a long period of time. Usually, scientists measure climate over 30 years or more. So when we say a country has a hot climate, we mean it is usually hot most of the time. Not just for one day or 1 week. This difference is very important. Because climate change is not about daily weather changes. It is about long-term patterns changing across the entire planet. Now let's talk about why Earth's temperature is changing. The main reason is something called greenhouse gases. These gases are in our atmosphere, and they include carbon dioxide and methane. Normally, these gases help keep Earth warm enough for life. They trap some of the sun's heat and prevent it from escaping back into space. This is called the greenhouse effect. And without it, Earth would be too cold for humans, animals, and plants. But the problem is that human activities are increasing these gases too much. Factories, cars, power plants, and deforestation all release large amounts of carbon dioxide. When we burn coal, oil, and gas, we add more heat-trapping gases into the air. As a result, more heat is trapped in the atmosphere. And slowly, the average temperature of the planet is rising. Even a small increase in temperature can have a big effect over time. It can change rainfall patterns. It can melt ice in polar regions. And it can make weather more extreme and less predictable. So, in short, climate change is happening because Earth is holding more heat than before. And this is changing the natural balance of our planet. So what does extreme weather actually mean? Extreme weather means unusual and very intense weather conditions. It is when weather becomes stronger, more dangerous, or more damaging than normal. It is not just regular rain, wind, or heat. It is weather that goes far beyond what we usually expect in a certain place. In other words, extreme weather is when nature behaves in a powerful and unusual way. And it often causes damage to people, buildings, agriculture, and the environment. Let's look at some common examples of extreme weather. First, we have heat waves. A heat wave is a long period of extremely hot weather. Temperatures can rise much higher than normal for several days or even weeks. Heat waves can be dangerous for humans, especially older people and children. They can also cause problems like dehydration, wildfires, and power cuts. Next, we have floods. Floods happen when too much water covers land that is usually dry. This can happen because of heavy rain, rivers overflowing, or storms. Floods can destroy homes, roads, and farmland very quickly. They can also force people to leave their houses. Then we have storms. Storms include heavy rain, strong winds, thunder, lightning, and sometimes even hurricanes or cyclones. Strong storms can damage buildings, break trees, and interrupt transport and electricity. In some cases, storms can become very destructive within a short time. Another example is droughts. A drought happens when there is not enough rain for a long period of time. This leads to dry soil, water shortages, and problems for farming. Crops may fail, and animals may suffer because there is not enough water or food. Now you might ask, why are these extreme weather events becoming more common? Scientists believe there are several reasons, but climate change is the main one. As the Earth becomes warmer, the energy in the atmosphere increases. This extra energy affects how weather systems behave. It can make heat waves stronger and longer. It can increase. Warmer air also holds more moisture. This means that when it rains, it can rain much harder than before. That is why we are seeing more severe floods in many parts of the world. At the same time, some areas become drier because weather patterns change. This leads to longer droughts and water shortages. Another important reason is that natural systems are becoming less stable. Ice is melting in polar regions, oceans are warming, and wind patterns are shifting. All of these changes affect how weather behaves globally. So, extreme weather is not just random. It is connected to larger changes happening in Earth's climate system. And as the planet continues to warm, scientists expect these events to become even more frequent in the future. Now, we are going to focus on something much more direct and much more real. We are going to look at what is happening around the world today. Because climate change is no longer something people only discuss in scientific conferences or environmental reports. It is now becoming part of everyday life for millions of people across different countries and continents. In recent years, many regions around the world have experienced weather events that were stronger, longer, and more destructive than what people were used to in the past. And what makes this especially important is that these events are no longer rare surprises that happen once in a generation. Instead, they are beginning to appear more frequently, in more places, and with greater intensity. For example, many countries in Europe have experienced powerful floods caused by extremely heavy rainfall over very short periods of time. In some cities, roads disappeared under water within hours. Rivers overflowed into neighborhoods. Cars were carried away by strong currents. And thousands of people suddenly found themselves trapped inside homes or forced to evacuate during the middle of the night. For many families, these floods did not just damage buildings. They destroyed memories, personal belongings, businesses, and years of hard work. Some people lost electricity for days. Others lost access to transportation, schools, or clean water. And in some cases, entire communities needed months or even years to recover. At the same time, southern Europe and many Mediterranean regions have been facing extremely intense heat waves during summer months. Temperatures in some places reached levels that made outdoor activities dangerous during the daytime. Hospitals received more patients suffering from dehydration and heat exhaustion. Older people and individuals with health conditions became especially vulnerable during these periods of extreme heat. For workers whose jobs require staying outside, such as construction workers, delivery workers, farmers, or road workers, these heat waves created daily physical stress that affected both health and productivity. In some cities, governments even advised people to remain indoors during the hottest hours of the day because temperatures had reached unusually dangerous levels. Meanwhile, in North America and parts of Canada, massive wildfires have become one of the clearest examples of how climate conditions are changing. Long periods of heat combined with dry vegetation and strong winds created conditions where fires could spread extremely quickly across forests and rural areas. In some regions, smoke from these fires traveled hundreds or even thousands of kilometers through the atmosphere. People living far away from the fires still experienced dark skies and poor air quality because smoke particles spread across large distances. Schools cancelled outdoor activities. Flights were delayed. And many people were advised to wear masks or stay indoors because breathing the polluted air became dangerous. In Asia, powerful storms and typhoons have continued to affect coastal regions with increasing intensity. Heavy rainfall caused severe flooding in urban areas where drainage systems could not handle the large amount of water arriving in a short time. Strong winds damaged homes, transportation systems, and electrical infrastructure, leaving many people without power or communication services during emergencies. In other regions, especially parts of Africa and the Middle East, drought conditions have become more serious and longer lasting. In these places, reduced rainfall affects agriculture directly because farmers depend heavily on seasonal rain to grow crops and support livestock. When rain does not arrive as expected, harvests become smaller, water supplies decrease, and food prices can rise significantly. For ordinary families, this creates financial pressure that affects daily life in many different ways. Some families must spend more money on food and water. Others may need to travel longer distances to access clean water sources. And in rural communities, drought can threaten entire local economies that depend on agriculture. What is important to understand is that these events are not isolated problems happening separately in different parts of the world. Scientists see connections between many of these extreme weather events and the overall warming of the planet. As global temperatures rise, the atmosphere changes. Warmer air can hold more moisture, which increases the possibility of extremely heavy rainfall and severe flooding. At the same time, higher temperatures dry out vegetation and soil more quickly, increasing the risk of droughts and wildfires. Warmer oceans also influence storms because storms gain energy from warm ocean water. When ocean temperatures rise, storms can become stronger and carry more moisture, which increases rainfall intensity and flood risks in coastal regions. So while not every single storm or flood can be blamed entirely on climate change alone, scientists explain that climate change increases the likelihood and severity of many extreme weather events by creating conditions that make these disasters more intense than they might have been in the past. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is that climate change is no longer just an environmental issue. It is also becoming an economic issue, a health issue, a transportation issue, and a daily life issue. People now think differently about summer temperatures, electricity usage, flood risks, water supplies, insurance costs, farming conditions, and even where they choose to live. Cities are redesigning infrastructure. Governments are improving emergency warning systems. And scientists continue studying how to predict and reduce future risks. So when we talk about climate change today, we are not talking only about the future anymore. We are talking about a process that is already shaping the present. And for millions of people around the world, the effects are no longer theoretical. They are part of everyday reality. Now we need to ask one very important question. How are humans connected to all of this? Because while Earth's climate has changed naturally many times throughout history, scientists believe that the rapid warming happening today is strongly connected to human activity, especially during the last 100 to 150 years, when industrial development, large-scale energy use, and modern transportation systems expanded very quickly across the world. At the center of this issue is the large amount of greenhouse gases humans release into the atmosphere. The most important of these gases is carbon dioxide, also known as CO. When people burn fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas, carbon dioxide is released into the air. These fuels are used almost everywhere in modern life. They are used to produce electricity. They are used in factories. They are used in transportation systems. And they are used in heating and industrial production. For many decades, global economies depended heavily on these energy sources because they were powerful, accessible, and efficient for industrial growth. But over time, the constant release of greenhouse gases began changing the atmosphere itself. As more carbon dioxide collects in the atmosphere, more heat becomes trapped around the planet. This strengthens the greenhouse effect and slowly increases Earth's average temperature. One of the biggest contributors to emissions is industry. Factories around the world produce enormous quantities of products every single day, including electronics, clothing, steel, cement, plastics, chemicals, vehicles, and countless other goods used in modern life. Producing these materials requires huge amounts of energy, and in many countries that energy still comes from burning fossil fuels. Heavy industries such as steel and cement production are especially important in this discussion because they consume very large amounts of energy and release high levels of carbon emissions during manufacturing processes. And as the global population grows and demand for products increases, industrial production continues expanding as well. Transportation is another major factor connected to climate change. Every day, millions of cars, buses, trucks, airplanes, and ships move people and goods across cities, countries, and continents. Most of these transportation systems still rely on gasoline, diesel, or aviation fuel, which produce carbon emissions when burned. In large cities, traffic congestion creates another problem because vehicles spend long periods moving slowly or remaining stuck in traffic while engines continue running, increasing fuel consumption and air pollution at the same time. Air travel also contributes significantly to emissions because airplanes consume large amounts of fuel during long-distance flights. And because international trade depends heavily on transportation networks, global emissions from transport continue growing as economies become more connected. Pollution is another important issue linked to human activity and climate change. Air pollution caused by factories, power plants, and vehicles affects both the environment and human health. In many urban areas, polluted air creates serious respiratory problems, especially for children, older adults, and people with existing health conditions. But pollution is not limited only to air. Industrial waste, plastic pollution, and environmental destruction also place pressure on ecosystems that normally help regulate the climate, such as forests, oceans, and wetlands. Forests are especially important because trees absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. However, deforestation removes these natural systems that help reduce greenhouse gases. When forests are cut down for construction, agriculture, or industrial expansion, less carbon dioxide is absorbed, while more remains trapped in the atmosphere. Now let's talk about cities, because cities are becoming some of the most vulnerable places when it comes to climate change and extreme weather. Modern cities contain large populations, dense infrastructure, heavy transportation systems, and enormous energy consumption concentrated within relatively small areas. This creates conditions where extreme weather can affect millions of people very quickly. One major problem is something called the urban heat island effect. In cities, surfaces such as concrete, asphalt, roads, and buildings absorb heat from sunlight during the day and slowly release it during the night. As a result, cities often remain much hotter than surrounding rural areas, especially during heat waves. This means that during periods of extreme heat, temperatures inside cities can become dangerous for people who do not have access to cooling systems or safe indoor environments. Hospitals may receive more emergency cases. Electricity demand increases sharply because people use air conditioning more frequently. And power systems can become overloaded during periods of very high energy use. Cities are also highly vulnerable to flooding. Many urban areas contain large amounts of concrete and paved surfaces that prevent water from naturally entering the soil. So when heavy rainfall occurs, water flows quickly across streets and roads instead of being absorbed into the ground. If drainage systems cannot handle the amount of rainfall, flooding can spread rapidly through neighborhoods, transportation systems, underground stations, and commercial areas. Another important issue is population density. When extreme weather affects a city, very large numbers of people can be impacted at the same time. Transportation may stop working. Hospitals may become overcrowded. Emergency services may struggle to respond quickly enough. And essential systems such as electricity, communication, and water supply can become unstable during major disasters. So when we look at the full picture, we can clearly see that climate change is deeply connected to the way modern society currently produces energy, builds cities, manufactures products, and moves people and goods around the world. But at the same time, understanding this connection is important because it also means humans have the ability to change direction. New technologies, cleaner energy systems, improved transportation, sustainable urban planning, and environmental protection policies all have the potential to reduce emissions and create more resilient societies in the future. Now this is probably the most important question of all. Because after understanding what climate change is, how extreme weather works, what is happening around the world today, and how human activity contributes to the problem, we naturally come to a very important question. What can we actually do about it? And more importantly, can we still change the direction of the future? To begin with, we need to understand that solutions exist at different levels, starting from individual actions, moving to governments, and finally reaching global cooperation between countries. Let's start with individual actions. Even though one person alone cannot stop climate change, individual behavior is still very important, because when millions of people make small changes in their daily lives, those changes combine into a much larger global impact over time. One of the simplest actions is reducing energy consumption in everyday life. This includes turning off lights when they are not needed, using energy-efficient appliances, unplugging devices that are not in use, and being more mindful of heating and cooling systems at home, because even small reductions in electricity use can reduce overall demand for fossil fuel energy when applied across large populations. Another important area is transportation choices. People can reduce their carbon footprint by using public transport instead of private cars, walking or cycling for short distances, and sharing vehicles when possible, because transportation is one of the major sources of global emissions, especially in large cities where traffic is constant and fuel consumption is high. Consumption habits also matter. Reducing waste, recycling materials, and avoiding unnecessary consumption of goods can help reduce the demand for industrial production, which in turn reduces energy use and emissions in factories. Even simple actions like choosing reusable products instead of single-use plastics can make a difference when adopted widely. Now let's move to governments and larger systems. Governments play a very powerful role in shaping how societies respond to climate change, because they can create laws, invest in infrastructure, and guide entire national economies toward more sustainable systems. Many countries are now increasing their investment in renewable energy sources such as solar power, wind energy, and hydropower, which generate electricity with far lower greenhouse gas emissions compared to fossil fuels. As technology improves, these energy sources are becoming more efficient, more affordable, and more widely available, which makes the transition to clean energy more realistic than ever before. Governments are also introducing environmental regulations that limit pollution from factories, encourage cleaner industrial processes, and support innovation in green technologies, while also funding research programs that aim to better understand climate systems and develop solutions for reducing emissions. At the same time, international cooperation is extremely important because climate change is not limited to one country or one region. It is a global issue that requires global coordination, where countries work together through agreements, policies, and shared goals to reduce emissions and support climate adaptation strategies. Cities and local governments are also becoming key players in this effort, because urban areas are major sources of emissions and also highly exposed to climate risks, so many cities are investing in better public transport systems, energy-efficient buildings, green spaces, and flood protection infrastructure to become more resilient in the face of extreme weather. Now, despite the seriousness of the problem, it is very important to talk about hope. Because climate change is not a fixed or unstoppable process, it is a challenge created by human activity, which means it can also be influenced by human decisions, innovation, and cooperation. We are already seeing positive developments around the world. Renewable energy is growing. Electric vehicles are becoming more common. Energy efficiency is improving. And global awareness about environmental issues is much higher than it was in the past. More people today understand the importance of climate action, and more governments and organizations are taking steps toward sustainability, which shows that change is already happening, even if it is not yet fast enough. The future will depend on what we do now, because the decisions made in this decade will shape climate conditions for many decades ahead, and even small improvements in emissions reduction today can have long-term benefits for future generations. So while the challenge is large, it is not hopeless. And the most important message is that action is still possible. Action at the personal level. Action at the governmental level. And action at the global level. And when all of these levels work together, there is still a real chance to slow down climate change and build a safer, more stable, and more sustainable future for everyone.
Cinema Talks?
Now let's move into our Cinema Talk section. Here, we connect today's topic with a movie that gives us a dramatic and powerful picture of what extreme weather can look like when climate systems become unstable. The film we are talking about is The Day After Tomorrow, released in 2004. It is a disaster movie directed by Roland Emmerich, and it became widely known for its intense visual scenes of storms, flooding, freezing temperatures, and sudden climate collapse. What makes this movie fit our topic so well is that it takes the idea of climate change and turns it into a large-scale story about extreme weather disasters affecting entire cities and countries at the same time. In the movie, the world experiences rapid and violent climate shifts, where huge storms form, sea levels rise, and freezing air moves across regions in a very short time. The result is a world where normal life breaks down very quickly, and people are forced to deal with emergency situations, survival problems, and massive environmental danger. Of course, the movie is not a scientific prediction of exactly what will happen in real life. It is far more dramatic than reality, and it uses Hollywood storytelling to create suspense and excitement. But even with that in mind, the film still has value, because it helps people imagine how serious climate-related disasters can become when weather systems are pushed far beyond normal limits. It also reminds us that climate change is not only about numbers, charts, or scientific reports. It is about real people, real cities, real homes, and real lives being affected by changing environmental conditions. One reason the movie is so effective is that it shows how quickly comfort and safety can disappear when weather becomes extreme. A place that felt normal in one moment can become dangerous in the next. A city that looked modern and powerful can suddenly become vulnerable and helpless. And that idea is important because it reflects the truth that many communities around the world already face when floods, storms, heat waves, or wildfires arrive without enough warning or preparation. The movie also teaches an important lesson about awareness. Even though the science in the film is exaggerated, the message behind it is still meaningful because it encourages viewers to think seriously about the planet, the atmosphere, and the consequences of ignoring long-term climate problems. It shows that environmental change is not something distant or abstract. It is something that can affect transportation, health, food, energy, and everyday life. So, in our podcast episode, The Day After Tomorrow works as more than just a movie recommendation. It becomes a visual reminder of why climate awareness matters, why preparedness matters, and why understanding extreme weather is important for all of us, even if the film itself is more dramatic than realistic.
Words of wisdom.
Now let's move into our word of wisdom section. In this part, we take a short break from explanations and facts, and we focus on a simple idea that carries a very deep meaning about how we see the world and how we understand our responsibility toward the planet. The quote we are reflecting on today is, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children." At first, this sentence may sound simple and easy to understand. But when we think about it more deeply, it becomes much more powerful and meaningful. It tells us that the Earth is not something we truly own. It is not a possession that belongs to one generation or one group of people. Instead, it is something that passes through time from one generation to another. This means that the planet we are living on today was shaped by countless generations before us, who used its resources, built civilizations, and lived their lives in different conditions. And in the same way, the Earth we have today will not stay with us forever. It will be passed on to future generations, who will depend on how we take care of it right now. When we look at it from this perspective, the meaning of the quote becomes very clear. We are not permanent owners of the planet. We are temporary caretakers. And this idea creates a sense of responsibility. Because if we are only borrowing the Earth, then we are also responsible for returning it in a good condition. This is where the connection to climate change becomes very important. If we damage the environment through pollution, deforestation, and excessive greenhouse gas emissions, then we are not only affecting the present, but we are also affecting the future. Future generations will have to live with the consequences of the decisions we make today. And they will experience the long-term effects of climate change in their daily lives. On the other hand, if we choose to protect nature, reduce emissions, and use resources more responsibly, then we are helping to create a better and safer world for those who come after us. So this quote is not only a reflection on nature. It is also a reflection on responsibility, time, and human impact. It reminds us that every action we take today has a future consequence. And it encourages us to think beyond our own lifetime when we make decisions about the environment. In the end, this wisdom teaches us that caring for the Earth is not just an option. It is a shared responsibility between generations.
Curious Minds. The Science Corner.
Now let's move into our Science Corner. In this part, we focus on one of the most important scientific processes that explains how Earth's temperature is controlled. And that is the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is a natural process that keeps the Earth warm enough to support life. Without it, the planet would be too cold for humans, animals, and plants to survive comfortably. To understand it, we need to imagine how energy from the sun interacts with the Earth. Sunlight reaches the Earth every day and brings energy in the form of heat and light. Some of this energy is absorbed by the Earth's surface, including land, oceans, and forests. This absorbed energy warms the planet. After that, the Earth naturally releases some of this heat back into the atmosphere and into space. This is a normal and balanced process that helps regulate temperature. Now here is where greenhouse gases become important. Greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor. These gases are naturally present in the atmosphere. And they act like a kind of invisible blanket around the Earth. When heat tries to escape from the Earth back into space, greenhouse gases trap part of that heat and send it back toward the surface. This process keeps the planet warm enough for life to exist. However, the problem begins when the amount of carbon dioxide increases too much. Human activities such as burning fossil fuels, running factories, and cutting down forests release large amounts of CO into the atmosphere. As the concentration of CO increases, more heat becomes trapped than before. This causes the Earth's average temperature to slowly rise over time. Even small increases in temperature can have very large effects on the climate system. Because the climate is very sensitive, even a 1-degree change can influence rainfall patterns, storm strength, and seasonal weather behavior. For example, warmer air can hold more moisture. This can lead to heavier rainfall in some regions and stronger flooding events. At the same time, other regions may become drier, which increases the risk of droughts. This is why small changes in temperature can create very large and complex changes in weather around the world. In addition to rainfall changes, higher temperatures also affect ice in polar regions. Ice begins to melt faster, which contributes to rising sea levels. And when ice melts, darker ocean water absorbs more heat from the sun, which increases warming even more. This creates a feedback effect that makes climate change stronger over time. So in simple terms, the greenhouse effect is natural and necessary for life. But when it becomes too strong because of human emissions, it starts to change the balance of Earth's climate system. And that is what leads to the long-term warming and extreme weather patterns we are observing today. Now we are reaching the end of today's episode. Before we finish, let's quickly go over what we have talked about so everything becomes clear and connected in one final overview. We started by understanding what climate change is in simple terms. We learned that it is a long-term change in Earth's temperature and weather patterns. We also explained the difference between weather and climate and why this difference is very important. Then we moved to extreme weather and saw how events like heatwaves, floods, storms, and droughts are becoming more intense and more frequent in many parts of the world. After that, we looked at real events happening today, where people are already experiencing the effects of stronger and more unpredictable weather in their daily lives. We also discussed how human activity contributes to climate change through industry, transportation, energy use, and pollution, and how cities are especially vulnerable to these changes because of their structure and population density. Finally, we talked about solutions, both at the individual level and the global level, and we saw that actions like saving energy, changing transport habits, using renewable energy, and improving policies can all help reduce emissions and slow down climate change. So if we take a step back, the main message of this episode is very clear. Climate change is not something in the distant future. It is already happening now. And it is already affecting weather, nature, and human life across the world. But at the same time, this is not a hopeless situation. Because human actions are also part of the solution. The choices we make today, even small ones, can still influence the direction of the future. And when millions of people make better choices together, the impact becomes very real and very powerful over time. So awareness is important. Understanding is important. And action is even more important. Thank you for listening to this episode and spending this time exploring such an important topic with me. And in the next episode, we will continue looking at another real-world topic that connects science, daily life, and global changes in a simple and clear way. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and take care.